Welcome back. Today is April 15, 2026, and we are joined by Larry Johnson, a former CIA analyst who now publishes at Sonar 21, and I will leave a link in the description, which I highly recommend. So thank you very much for coming back on the program.
I always enjoy our conversations.
Glad to hear it. And let's start with the Strait of Hormuz, because, yes, well, we are in a ceasefire, at least so we're told. Yet a blockade has been put now on Iran's ports, which is an act of war, which is a strange escalation to do during a ceasefire. And it tends to be brought into the conversation by spokespeople in the White House, even at the same time as they're saying we're abiding by the ceasefire. So it's unclear what the ceasefire means, but at least they're not shooting at them, it appears.
Right.
But what is the likely success of this blockade? Because from what I understand, they have to keep a fairly safe distance, and the waterway is not narrow when you go this far down south.
Yeah. So this is all, it's like a Japanese kabuki theater. It's very stylized, very scripted. The U.S. has a version of what's going on. They are stopping every ship. There's not a ship getting out. Boy, they've got it locked down tight. Meanwhile, the other reports indicate that, that Iran's allowing ships to leave, and those ships are not being stopped. The people that are in a position to know what's actually going on described it as, one described it, he says, it's like a security guard at a mall. Yeah, he's got a uniform, but no real authority to do much, and not terribly effective. So this could potentially heat up, but as you noted in your introduction, there is Iran has the potential. They've got coastal defense cruise missiles. They've got close-range ballistic missiles, and they have a variety of drones, both underwater and on water and in the air, sort of three dimensions that they can use against any ship, any U.S. ship that gets within, say, 200 miles of the coast. So the Abraham Lincoln, for example, in March, it had gotten within 220 miles of the coast, and it got attacked and suffered damage that even Donald Trump later admitted, they'd been attacked from 17 sides. So right now it appears that Chinese vessels carrying oil for China have left the strait and are making their way to China and have not been stopped. Now this could all change, but if the U.S. You need to do a proper interdiction on these ships. You need helicopters. Destroyers, they can come up and threaten to shoot you, but they're not going to carry that job out. And once it's putting, even if you had an aircraft carrier and the two marine, they look like small aircraft carriers. They carry lots of helicopters. They can only cover a limited area, and it's stretching air assets. It really is putting a strain on U.S. air assets, is what I'm hearing. That both the maintenance costs, the stress, the time up in the air, and then it's not easy to figure out where ships are. These oceans are big, and the ships don't have. There's not an easy automatic way to track it. I mean, I learned that the hard way over. In working with the Joint Special Operations Command over 23 years. And when we would do exercises, some that were maritime, unless you put a transponder on a ship and it sends out a beacon like friend or foe, then fine, you might be able to track it. But otherwise, there's no way to know, you can you can see something on radar, but it doesn't necessarily tell you what it is. So and then we get to what's the purpose of the blockade? And this is where the Trump administration's all over the board. Early on, they immediately lifted sanctions on Russia and Iran. Why? Because they wanted the supply of oil, keep the supply of oil up. But now, this week, they've reimposed sanctions on Russian oil, and they're trying to shut down the flow of Iranian oil, and they've already lost 20% of the world's supply. And yet the oil markets are acting like, oh, boy, we're going to, happy days are here again. Prices are going down on the oil futures, but the actual price people are paying where the ships finally dock is like 140 to, I've seen one price as high as $210 a barrel for Singapore. So the economic gut punch that's coming from this, the West they got their eyes closed. And what compounds this is the literal craziness of Donald Trump. He is out of touch with reality. He doesn't remember from one day to the next what it is that he has said. He says things that he believes sincerely are true that just are not true. Such as Iran's begging for negotiations. No, they're not. Not at all. We're the ones begging for those negotiations. Iran can live without it. And Trump is he's emotionally volatile, yelling at people, getting angry. And so the best description I've heard of it is it's like kids living with an alcoholic, abusive father. Don't wake dad up, tiptoe quietly, don't do anything to get the old man angry because he's going to start punching you or beating you. That's how they're treating Donald Trump right now, which is frightening. So there is a lot going on behind the scenes that this is not some great 5D chess game that that Trump's maneuvering and trying to accomplish this objective or the other. No, man, he's making it up as he goes along piece by piece. And the only one that has been firm about this is a bad decision, this is wrong, has been J.D. Vance, and Trump's gone out of his way to humiliate and isolate J.D. Vance.
And I often wonder when I see these tweets that, today he tweeted out that China is very happy that I'm opening the Strait of Hormuz. I'm doing it for them, for the Chinese. At the same, and at the same time putting a blockade on Iranian ports in which 90% of the oil goes to China. Yeah. And at the same time, that same day, Scott Bessent comes out and said that, well, we're going to sanction probably 2 Chinese banks at least for buying Iranian oil because Iran is a sponsor of terrorism. That's the argument. So, and at the same time, the U.S. is opening the Strait of Hormuz for China. I mean, I don't know who the audience is for this, though. I mean, the Chinese are not sitting there going, oh, well, wonderful. How kind. I mean, is it for the MAGA cult? I mean, it's hard to see who this is for. But with the naval blockade, as you said, it requires a lot of naval assets, which are being overstretched. But with more assets in the region, they have to dock somewhere for maintenance. A lot of the logistics, it appears, have taken some damage and hits. To what extent do you think this makes the U.S. more exposed, though?
Oh, it's unsustainable. And, we're winning, we're in control. Then why is the George H.W. Bush carrier sailing along the west coast of Africa to get to the Persian Gulf region? Why didn't it take the shortcut and come through the Med, down the Suez Canal, and then through the Red Sea? Because they're scared to death that they'd get sunk by the Houthis. Scared to death. That's the reality. And you bring up the excellent point about where they're going to get the maintenance and service for these ships, if nothing else, to be refueled, refitted. That's Diego Garcia is really the closest base. The United States has got itself in an unsustainable military operation. And so what's going on is the Trump's pronouncements. Everything is being done for the American audience. Just to come and say, hey, things are cool, things are all right, don't worry, it's all great. But the reality of what's actually unfolding out there is something else. And meanwhile, like they're attacking China, yet we've seen in this week, at the end of last week and into this week, China and Russia have stepped up their activities in trying to broker a peace, working with the Saudis, working with the Emiratis, working with the Iranians. Russia approached Turkey. The Turkish foreign minister signed on board. Yeah, we'll do that. So there's actually work around the United States. Ignore the United States as not being relevant any longer. But to conduct these air assets that are required and the naval assets required to try to do an interdiction, it's going to get stressed out. And if to be the most effective at it, they've got to be close into the Iranian shore. But the closer they get, then the more vulnerable they are that if this war kicks off and goes hot again. Right now we have a ceasefire that's in effect until Monday. Pakistan is undertaking significant efforts right now to try to get the negotiations back on. J.D. Vance, I've learned, he was the one that had agreed to the Iran's 10-point peace plan, or 10-point plan for negotiations, restarting negotiations. Trump then, under pressure from all of his Zionist donors, then backed away and said, we didn't accept any of that. They were actually making some progress until Vance was basically told, shut up and come home, stop talking. But now the realization about the economic effects, the negative effects on the U.S. economy and the global economy, it's starting to hit home. God, the more I watch this Scott Bessent, the more I dislike the man. I mean, he just, you want to just go and punch him in the face. He's such a Weasley, oily character. They tried to pretend that things are great, and things are not great. It's anecdotal, but one of my neighbors is a rancher, so he's got a ranch 20 miles outside of where we live. But he was commenting that he's had to pay, the price of diesel is up over $2 a gallon. So, that's adding almost 40% to his fuel costs. Fertilizer is triple the cost. And then on top of it, he needs to buy, we've had a drought in Florida. And so the hay, the grass that normally would feed cattle hasn't grown. So he's had to purchase hay, or trying to purchase hay. He says it's very difficult to come by right now. He said last year he bought 40 bales of hay, $40 a barrel per bale. So that's you get it's now $90. So it's more than doubled in price. And he, instead of 40 bales, he needs 90. So he's now up to $3,600 as opposed to $1,600. So again, almost more than double the price. And he says, I'm in the red. That's happening to farmers and ranchers across the United States and around the world. So what we're looking at here is the beginnings of what's going to be a collapse of the global food system, potentially. I mean, it could get that serious. So this is very, the Trump administration is a bit like Nero fiddling away while Rome is burning. They've not putting out the fire, and instead the policy moves are, as you pointed out, they're completely contradictory. 1 minute, we don't need who cares about the Strait of Hormuz? We don't need it, said Trump. And then the next minute he's demanding in the most foul language possible that Iran open the strait. And then he's complaining that the Europeans aren't pitching in to help. Then he turns around and he blockades it so nothing gets out. And now he's saying, oh, yeah, we're helping China. China loves us for what we're doing because we're stopping the flow of oil to China. I mean, it's all over. It's a complete scatterbrained approach. And the only thing that explains it, it's not 5D chess, man. This is a mental illness.
Well, that's why it just looks like this shock to the system is difficult to absorb, especially now. I mean, if it happened, like 2-3 decades ago, maybe it would have been easier. But we now have all this just-in-time logistics where we don't rely on warehouses, so everything has to run smoothly in order to reduce logistics cost. So that can't absorb much shock. You have people where you have record numbers living paycheck to paycheck, who are severely in debt. So if you suddenly have a slight increase in food prices or energy, it's very difficult to absorb it. Now we're going to have this massive energy shock where the prices double. We have a massive food shortage coming up. Prices are spiking. I mean, you can see how the problems will just start to spread through the entire system. And I would like to make predictions, but because it's so all-encompassing, it's going to affect everything. So it's quite dramatic. I mean, such a massive shock to the system. I don't think they know what's coming down the road. Well, I guess we shouldn't listen too much to what Trump is saying as opposed to what he's doing. But he did say, that this war will soon be over. Of course, he's been overly optimistic since day one. But do you think he's expecting a defeat of Iran? Because I see a lot of U.S. military hardware being moved into the region. Or do you think his desperation is kicking in, so they need to find an out?
Well, it's more about creating a narrative that he thinks will sell, that sounds good on Fox News. He literally he confines himself to watching Fox, reading the New York Times, and not doing much else beyond that. So he's got really a narrow information flow, and up until about 2 or 3 weeks ago, he wasn't getting the bad news. He was not, because if he'd get bad news, he'd fly into a rage and blame the person that was delivering the news. This is Shakespearean. I mean, this is a modern version of King Lear that has gone mad. And no one's come up with a fix. What do we do with this guy? He should actually be removed from office, receive medical care, being one of those, care facilities for people with dementia. But, instead he's allowed to still be in charge of this country and to make decisions, irrational decisions at that. To think that it was a good idea to send out a picture of himself as Jesus and, healing the sick. And then he turns around to say, "Oh, I was a doctor. What are you talking about?" And there's growing concern within the White House, I'm told, and I'm told by somebody who's in a position to know. So this is worse than the Biden situation. Biden, could fly off the handle too, but he was relatively harmless. Trump is not. Trump has a viciousness to him, and he's lost all empathy. And so this, right now with the information that's coming out about the so-called blockade, it appears that the Navy is deliberately lying to him, telling him what he wants to hear. Meanwhile, there are efforts underway to restart the talks and to use the whole nuclear issue as the way to get out of this. J.D. Vance wants to exit the war, and the way you exit it is basically you resurrect JCPOA. You don't call it that, but that's what it is. It would be on-site inspections by IAEA, continued support of the Non-Proliferation Treaty by Iran. But instead of a 10-year time, an agreement that lasts 10 years, this will be a forever agreement. That'll be Trump's. That's why he'll be able to say it's a much better agreement than what they had before, because now he's got a permanent, forever agreement, and Israel's safe. There are also reports out today that there's going to be a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. And that goes back to one of the demands that Iran made. So if they pull that off, the problem is Trump is very much being driven around by Bibi Netanyahu. So even though Vice President Vance may be given the green light to do certain things, he doesn't have the ultimate authority here. And Trump's decisions are very mercurial. One day he's in favor of it, and the next day he's opposed to it.
Yeah, I saw him give an interview where he was arguing, we could have, we could have this war over with soon. We can get a deal which makes sure Iran doesn't get a nuclear weapon. And, this gives me some optimism, because this sounds like an out. I mean, if this was the goal, Iran not to have a nuclear weapon, they could have kept the JCPOA. They could have easily got another agreement, something with, commitments plus transparency, something they can verify. But it's the fact that it was first linked up to these other issues that is on limiting its ballistic missile program, or decoupling from its regional partners. All these things were also had to capitulate its conventional deterrence. So I thought, this could be a sign of optimism. On the other hand, I always blame myself when I listen too much to what Trump is actually saying. It's more interesting to see what he's actually doing. But otherwise, he's pushing a narrative, though, the victory narrative. And he always refers to how many leaders he's killed, the infrastructure destroyed, the military targeting, which has been diminished. How do you see this, though? Because does he genuinely, is this a selling point, or do you think he genuinely believes that a lot of killing equals victory? Because I thought, the forever wars in the Middle East, the one thing they proved is the U.S. can have all these tactical victories, but it doesn't win.
Right.
I mean, it's, or do you think he's not appreciating this, or is it, again, he's just selling a war?
Well, he's telling what he's being told, or he's repeating what he's being told. And so the Pentagon had, through Hegseth, they're basically lying to him. They're not giving him the true picture of what this conflict actually is. So they get the tout, we've blown up this and we've blown up that. Meanwhile, they're not reporting the Iran has rapidly rebuilt, repaired several of the sites that we thought we, quote, had destroyed for 20 years that are now back in operation. And what I am hearing is within military circles, the planners, they are extremely concerned about new weaponry that China has introduced. Now, they're out saying, China's promised Trump that they're not introducing weapons. Well, I'm not sure that China has even said that to Trump, but even if they said it, they're not doing it. They're doing the exact opposite. So there is real concern that that there has been a significant upgrade in the air defense system on the part of, with the assistance of China, that F-35s, all the fourth generation fighters that the United States has flown into the region, that they will be vulnerable and will likely be shot down, at least some.
Yeah, I've seen some reports of Chinese aircrafts delivering unknown material in Iran. I'm assuming that these are weapons. And, I didn't take Trump's comments that serious about China's promise, because it looks like Trump and the Chinese essentially want the same thing. Trump needs headlines which suggest that the Chinese, respect his authority, that they wouldn't dare to send weapons. And the Chinese are also happy with the headlines that they're not supplying weapons. So it seems like they both win. But of course, I do think the Chinese are supplying. But what is the likelihood, do you think, though, that there could be well, if the ceasefire is extended, or if there's not a peace agreement, or if there's an actual peace agreement. Because I always thought that the main challenge for Trump is, on one hand, he would like an out, but what the Iranians demand as an out, it essentially prevents, well, it's too big of a price to pay, too humiliating defeat, especially after making all these victory laps claiming to have won.
Yeah. Well, he'll be able, look, I think if he can build the narrative and avoid the humiliation by simply selling the story that, hey, I have got a permanent end, forever and ever, Iran will never have a nuclear weapon. He can sell that and then, excuse the lifting of sanctions as, and we're going to make, fulfill our promise that Iran's going to become a great economic power. The other component of this, though, is what happens with the war between Lebanon, Hezbollah, and Israel. So, I think Israel has suffered enough damage in that war that they're also looking for a way out. So if they can get some sort of new ceasefire agreement in place with Hezbollah, I think they'll take it. Still doesn't solve the Gaza question, but there are sort of other pressures here is that Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff and their associates, they've got significant investments in the Gulf, particularly in the United Arab Emirates, and they're at risk of losing that money. So that's the other incentive to try to get a negotiated end to this as quickly as possible, so they can try to salvage their investments in those countries. I don't think UAE is recoverable now. I think it's beyond recoverable. But you'd have had direct intervention diplomatically with the Chinese, with the UAE yesterday or the day before, and also with the Saudis and the Qataris. So, and Russia as well as talking. So Russia and China are working together to try to create a peace settlement that will exclude the United States. The United States will not be party to that. And who knows? They could conceivably pull that off. I don't rule out anything on that front.
But I remember, after the 12-day war, we spoke in length. I remember about the damages to Israel's infrastructure, economy, industries. Do we know anything yet about the hit they've taken? Because it is. There's limits on the information coming out, but what do we know? Because certainly the reports we're getting, they do not cover, that extent of damage. And so I'm just wondering what we know so far.
It has been substantially worse, and we know that because if they had not caused significant damage, the Israelis would not have the censorship on that they do, because they would allow the media to come in and say, look, our air defense system has worked spectacularly. We haven't been hit. We got all the structures are standing. We're in great shape. They haven't done that because the opposite is true. They've taken a serious drubbing, and they're also working this respite. We're now 8 days into this, and it ends next Monday. We'll see if it gets extended. It may get extended. There is the Trump administration is desperate to get a deal done, and Iran's ready to go back and fight. So we'll see if Trump makes any further concessions. They will portray it as, Iran came begging to the table, begging to please come back. We got to keep talking. That was all Iran's doing. And, Iran, there's no guarantee that Iran will come back to the table either.
Yeah, no, well, it's been a few humiliating rounds. I'm thinking when Trump said, we have some constructive talks, so we're not going to hit them. And then for the foreign minister then to come out and say, no, we actually have no talks at all. I mean, if they really wanted a peace, this seems like a very strange game to play.
Yeah.
But what do we know now about the Iranian position, though? Because I spoke to some Iranians now who made the point that they have had that the negotiations seemed, well, let's say, strange in Islamabad. That is, Vance, couldn't really answer questions. He had to pick up the phone or call all the time. God knows who. But also, I was told that. At the end, when they thought that the negotiations were still going, Vance essentially and his team just packed up and said, "Okay, I guess we're done," and broke it off. So it's very hard to read this kind of diplomatic behavior.
Yeah, that was I think the most telling part from Professor Morandi, that it didn't have the courtesy to say, "Okay, hey, listen, folks, Foreign Minister Arachi, we've just got to recognize we're at an impasse. We're not going to be able to solve anything at this point. We're going to go now. We're going to go back and brief President Trump, and maybe we can get together next week or the following week to try to see if we can make some more nothing like that. It was just, okay, we're out of here. And, the Iranians right come and say, where'd the Americans go? Oh, they beat it. Now, when I first heard that, I sent Professor Morandi a note just saying, hey, I hope you guys are talking to the Russians or the Chinese about having them fly you back to Iran, because if you're at least under Chinese or Russian protection, they won't try to kill you. Whereas if you're flying on an Iranian airplane, they'll try to. I wouldn't put it past them to try to shoot you down. I guess what happened is they flew on a Pakistani flagged airline back, and that prevented Iran from being attacked by Israel.
It's so strange that this is a new thing, killing leaders and negotiators. It's it became normalized a bit too quickly, I feel. But it's going to make it very difficult to have diplomacy in the future. Indeed, the fact that this wasn't the argument, I remember in this Washington Post article that this should be a form of deterrent. If you don't agree to our deals, we should kill the negotiators personally. Like right. This is very. It doesn't look like a good, stable peace agreement can come from this.
Right.
But overall, though, where do you see this conflict going now? If the blockade's not going to work, the negotiations aren't moving forward, the military capabilities are built up, I mean, are we going just back to war?
I think that's where we're ultimately headed. I can see, look, from a logical standpoint, you can see that there's a clear exit ramp here for Trump. They can exit out of this war and try to get an economic solution in place that will start to repair the damage that's been done by having closed down the Strait of Hormuz and having shut down basically the export activities out of United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Saudis. I mean, Bahrain is toast. The U.S. base there is not coming back. Similarly, Kuwait has suffered some significant damage that may be unrecoverable. But just because we can see the logic in that, let's solve it. The pressure that Trump is under from Bibi Netanyahu is significant, and he's shown that he's unwilling to really confront them and say, look, the United States is going to chart its own path forward. And this leaves unresolved the situation in Gaza. It leaves unresolved the situation in Lebanon. And, I had to go back and look. I didn't realize, but this Lebanese war has been going on now for 51 years. The civil war in Lebanon between the Christians and the Muslims, the Shia in particular, got kicked off back in 1975 when the Phalangists, this Christian sect, attacked and killed about 35 Shia civilians. And boom, civil war was on, and that raged until it was sort of truce in 1990. But, now in the ensuing, in the ensuing 30 years, we still had these constant flare-ups. So 2006, Israel again invades southern Lebanon. There were bombings in Beirut in the 90s. So the conflict has never really gone away. And now in this latest round, Hezbollah's, holding its own and inflicting serious damage on Israel, which Israel can't sustain. So I could see the efforts to bring a peace. But to come back to what you said, let's look at what Trump is doing. Is Trump telling U.S. military units, okay, start withdrawing. Let's pull back. We're gonna scale down. No, just the opposite. Let's send more. We're ramping up. Now, I think the debacle that happened surrounding the rescue of that downed pilot or the crew member from the F-15 2 weeks ago, I think that has finally persuaded both the Pentagon and the White House that any kind of ground operations out of the question. Just too dangerous, too costly, too unpredictable. So they're going to continue with this economic pressure. One school that's advocating the complete blockade of Iranian ports believes that if we shut down their ability to send oil out, it will ultimately damage their ability to produce oil, and then they'll be in a crisis. They won't have any income, and then they'll implode. And there are some within the Trump administration that give that very serious credence. I think it's crazy, but that's what they're pushing.
But could that be the goal of the ceasefire, though? That is just to lower the intensity, because as the war is going now, the United States is using they're using all these expensive interceptor missiles. Their assets in the Gulf states are being attacked. Israel's getting attacked. So this high intensity war doesn't really work in U.S. advantage. But if one can call a ceasefire and then at the same time begin to gradually bleed the Iranians instead, putting some, blockade on their ports, which would also hurt the Chinese, essentially have try to assert some escalation control, a little bit like what was achieved in Ukraine, where essentially NATO countries can fire their missiles at Russia and then pretend it's Ukraine and Russia can't respond. Something similar that allows them to begin to drain and mow the lawn, if you will, in Iran without Iran being able to respond in a significant way. Or do you think it's delusional that such a blockade can be enforced properly and Iran would not retaliate in some way?
Yeah, no, I think it's delusional on their part, because the blockade of the ports is not Iran's only outlet. In other words, they can go through Turkmenistan. They can go through. So there are roads in to. It's not their only access to the outside world. Now those ports, volume wise, it can have an effect. But again, I don't think the United States has got the naval power in place to really stop it completely. And particularly if they start using the Chinese. Chinese have signaled very strongly that they're not going to put up with this. And that if any attempt by the United States to interfere with Chinese maritime traffic is going to be resisted.
How so, though? What are the Chinese saying?
Oh, they say they would treat it as an act of war. So, yeah. So, I mean, and I know that the U.S. military planners, that's the last thing they want, is to be, to get into a war with China, because I think it's now pretty apparent the United States wouldn't last 2 weeks with China if they actually got into a full-blown war. Because we simply don't have the strategic depth. We've drained our inventories of key weapon systems, THAADs, Patriots, the PAC-3 batteries. JDAMs are way down. JASSMs that we've used extensively, way down. Tomahawks, way down. And then you get to the supply chain problem, which China controls. to rebuild some of those weapon systems, you need the rare earths that China is not providing now. And we don't have a good alternative to go to.
Yeah, it looked like, if China, not if, well, given that China is the main peer competitor of the United States, and ever since the days of Obama back in 2016, at least the goal was to pivot to Asia to contain. None of what's being done now by Trump seems to make much sense. I mean, when he came to power, he suggested, I'll wrap up the Ukraine war, I'll end the forever wars. I mean, all of this made sense if the objective was to transfer the resources to the Western Hemisphere in East Asia. But now that the US is still fighting in Ukraine, at least, selling weapons, it's, still has its intelligence assets there, and now also doing this forever war with Iran. It's hard to see how the wider or larger strategic objective, in this massive shift of power can actually be achieved. It's very strange to watch, given that it looked like Trump had a very strategic outlook when he came in, and how little it corresponds with his actual actions. But let me just ask a last question. How do you think, what will be the wider consequence of this? I mean, of course, energy crisis, we may have food crisis, but without a crystal ball, what do you think are likely developments we might see from this war?
Look, we're trying to figure out what the hell are they going to do. It's going to be, the U.S. is losing influence in the Gulf. It basically promised all these Gulfies, hey, we got your back, we can protect you. You sign up with us, we'll protect you. Well, it turned out they couldn't protect them. They've been the most bizarre actions and behavior is that of the UAE. They are the most virulently opposed to Iran. And they've taken the biggest beating of all the, with maybe the exception of Bahrain. The Saudis are still, they're playing a double game. They're still trying to stay in bed with the United States, but they're under pressure to seek an accommodation with Iran. So, they just announced that the pipeline that flows to the Red Sea, that had been sabotaged. They already hit the other day. They've now repaired it. They're flowing. The oil's moving again, but they don't move that much oil. I mean, it's like 7 million barrels per day, which, sounds like a lot, but it's not a lot. It's still 50% about what they were putting out before. And it's still vulnerable that if this war goes hot, the Houthis will take out that port, that terminus. So the ability of the United States to dictate the future of that region is limited. The power of the U.S. dollar is going away. We saw the auction for Treasury bills. It was it dropped in terms of percentage of foreign buyers. So the Fed had to step in and buy up that amount. So I think you're going to see an expansion of Chinese and Russian influence throughout the Gulf, and I don't see Iran backing off from using, let's say, charging the user's fee. If you come into the Gulf, you're going to have to pay a fee. One way that they're going to recover and pay for the damages that were done as a result of this war launched by the United States and Israel. So Trump's erratic behavior he's not going to get better. In fact, we will see further deterioration. I honestly don't know if he'll make it to the end of his term, because his behavior is so odd, and it's creating real concern now in Washington. So that's going to be at play.
Yeah, the ability to lead, the seeming personal meltdown, the collapse, or not collapse, but the divisions within MAGA and decline of his administration. I think all of this is, creating a lot of panic and desperation, which is not what you want to see in a president at war. But here we are.
Well, and the news about the midterms, the prediction markets, the poly markets as they're called, they are showing a growing probability that the Democrats are going to sweep not just the House, but the Senate. And they could have as many as a majority of 54, 55 senators, with Republicans losing well over 10 seats. So this is, and then at that point, Trump has no agenda left, and he can be mad all he wants. The question is, will the Democrats impeach him, or will they just let him sit there and sort of twist slowly in the wind, like a body hanging off of a scaffold? J.D. Vance has tried desperately to try to keep Trump from going down the path of going to war with Iran, and he failed. And you're going to see it's going to be a mixture of political chaos in Washington, and with the possibility of Trump making some very irrational, dangerous decisions. But the sort of the good news for Iran is it's got solid backing in relationships with China, with Russia, and increasingly it looks like the Asian countries, since they're starting to go in their own direction, and I'm talking Japan, South Korea, Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, that the influence the United States once wielded there is slipping away very, very rapidly.
Yeah, not the best statecraft we've seen. So I know you have a busy day ahead of you, so thank you very much for taking the time.
All right, my friend, keep doing the good work. The world benefits from your wisdom.
Will do.
Okay,
Thanks.
Take care. Bye.
大家好，听完以上中情局的分析，我内心煎熬，很不是滋味。感觉美国不被作为一个世界强国，不被作为一个大国，更不被作为一个民主国家，整天喊打喊杀，跟街上的小混混一样，让人恶心唾弃。按这种情况下去，美国迟早会成为过街老鼠，人人喊打。美国所谓的停火、港口封锁，全是自导自演的闹剧。这场闹剧的背后，却由所有人共同来承担，真是天理何在？然而，从始至终，美国一直在作秀，在霍尔木兹海峡搞封锁，完全就是装个样子。就像以上嘉宾说的，美国看似实力强大，声势浩荡，兵力充足，却没有真正的管控能力，只是做样子。水上说封锁伊朗港口，可来往的船只照样进行，我国运输石油的船也正常通过，不受任何阻拦。明明是没能力封锁，却非要在全世界面前摆架子秀肌肉，这种自欺欺人的做法让人可悲又可笑。特朗普就是美国最大的悲哀，他混乱的决策、不稳定的情绪、前后矛盾的表达，毫无逻辑可言。前一天还说不在乎霍尔木兹海峡，隔天就强硬逼迫伊朗妥协，一边在缓和对华局势，一边又在制裁我们的银行企业，做事漏洞百出，根本经不起对焦。在这场战争里，不仅影响了伊朗和以色列人民的正常生活生存，更影响了美国自身的民众。美国各地农场主苦不堪言，柴油、肥料、草料价格大幅上涨，成本翻倍，导致亏损严重，能源溢价带来的连锁反应无处不在。全球物价飞涨，本来就疲惫的农业带来了更大的危机，普通人的生活压力也越来越重。然而，当下的情况，美军早已力不从心，毕竟美军经常要从事各种高强度的活动，还有超时间的服役，让美军心里很不是滋味。更何况他们感到这场仗是为以色列而打的，怎么导致他们经常搞出一些幺蛾子，让美军的能力大打折扣。美国看似强硬的手段，其实明眼人都看得出来是在作秀，最终只会带来自身的反噬，搞单边制裁， 打乱全球能源，导致中东的影响力下滑。以前很多的结盟国家、合作国家都会慢慢的与美国疏远，不再盲目依附于美国，从而主动的与中俄、伊朗展开深度的合作。说到底，这场战争没有赢家，但美国绝对是这场战争中最大的输家，丢掉了自己全球的地位。谢谢大家，当下是我的评论。